Hello dear friends, this is your personal English coach Professor DC, and in this video we will be understanding a unique chapter. This is called On Being Idle. It is written by Jerome K. Jerome. On my screen you can see the original chapter, and we will learn the word meanings along the way. Before beginning with the actual chapter, let's get to know the writer a little bit. Jerome K. Jerome was born on 2nd May 1859 in United Kingdom, and he died on 14th June 1927 in United Kingdom. He was an English writer, a humorist, best known for the comic travelogue Three Men in a Boat. Other works include the essay collection Idle Thoughts of an Idle Fellow and Second Thoughts of an Idle Fellow, Three Men on the Bummel, a sequel to Three Men in a Boat, and several other novels. His full name is Jerome K. Jerome. Having known the writer's background, let's begin with his essay. Now, this is a subject on which I flatter myself I really am au fait. So let's go back to the title. Do you know the meaning of the title? On Being Idle. Have you ever been idle? So idle means lazy. When you avoid work, you are idle. When you intentionally avoid doing something, you are idle. This is the subject of the writer's essay or article. And the writer claims that this is a subject on which he praises himself because he thinks he has a great and detailed knowledge about it. Knowledge about being idle, knowledge about avoiding work intentionally. Long sentence here. The gentleman who, when I was young, bathed me at Wisdom's font for 9 guineas a term, no extras, used to say he never knew a boy who could do less work in more time. And I remember my poor grandmother once incidentally observing, in the course of an instruction upon the use of the prayer book, that it was highly improbable that I should ever do much that I ought not to do, but that she felt convinced beyond a doubt that I should leave undone pretty well everything that I ought to do. Let's check out the word meanings here. So when the writer is referring to the gentleman at Wisdom's font, the writer is actually referring to a person at the church who used to give the author a holy bath, or we can say customary bath. Now, this is a ritual or a tradition by which a person becomes wise. To impart wisdom to a person, he needs to visit church and get this customary bath. So the writer is trying to recall his past, and he states that the person at the church who gave him a customary bath told him once that from all the boys that he knew, the writer was the only boy who had a world of time and did very little work still. Now this is incident number 1. What is incident number 2? The author recalls his grandmother who once told him that he was lazy. The author's grandmother observed. The grandmother thought that it was highly impossible that the writer did more than what he was assigned to do. It's unlikely, it's improbable that the writer over-delivered. In fact, on the contrary, she was convinced beyond a doubt that the writer would definitely leave some allotted work undone. She was convinced that the writer was lazy and lethargic and would not do as directed. So friends, here we see two occurrences which we can say are the evidence of the author's idle behavior. One at the church, and second in the writer's own house, an observation by his grandmother. Let's move on. I am afraid I have somewhat belied half the dear old lady's prophecy. Now, in a humorous tone, the author says, or we can say claims, that he was successful partially in proving his own grandmother incorrect or wrong. that he has proven the grandmother's prediction partially incorrect. Heaven help me, I have done a good many things that I ought not to have done, in spite of my laziness. So what did the writer's grandmother predict? She predicted that it was unlikely that the author did something that he was not assigned to do. But then in the sentence number 4, the writer claims that he has done certain things that he should not have done in spite of his lazy attitude, lethargic behavior. But I have fully confirmed the accuracy of her judgment, so far as neglecting much that I ought not to have neglected is a concern. But I have fully confirmed the accuracy of her judgment, so far as neglecting much that I ought not have neglected is concerned. The author states that he has confirmed the accuracy of his own grandmother's judgment. How accurate his grandmother's judgment was. The author is ready with facts and figures. He has confirmed her judgment. In which case? In the case of neglecting work that he was not supposed to neglect. Idling always has been my strong point. The author believes that spending time doing nothing at all is a strongest trait or characteristics that he has. I take no credit to myself in the matter. It is a gift. Few possess it. Now the writer knows that sitting and doing nothing, spending time doing nothing at all is not the right thing, but somehow he loves doing just that. And in sentence number 7, he says, people might get lazy at times if in case they have overworked, or if in case they want a small vacation or a holiday, they might become lazy and spend time in leisure. But in a humorous tone in sentence number 7, the writer says that laziness is his gift. Not many people can be lazy, can be idle all the time. Only few people possess this gift. There are plenty of lazy people and plenty of slow coaches, but a genuine idler is a rarity. So, as I stated earlier, few people can be lazy on certain occasions. But a genuine idler, which means a person who has laziness as a strong trait, who always feels lazy no matter what, is rare. He is not a man who slouches about with his hands in his pockets. On contrary, his most startling characteristic is that he is always intensely busy. Now the author is trying to define a person who is genuinely idle. So who is a person who is always idle, genuinely idle? He says he's not a man who slouches about with his hands in his pocket. Meaning of slouch is to stand, move or sit in a lazy, drooping way. The author says no, he is not a genuinely idle person. On the contrary, opposite to that, his most surprising characteristic is that he is always busy, intensely busy. Moving on. It is impossible to enjoy idling truly unless one has plenty of work to do. So when can you enjoy being lazy? Let us assume that you have no work at all and you are sitting at your home with nothing to do. So can we say that you are lazy? No, the writer says when a person has a lot to do and still he doesn't do that work, the person intentionally sits idle, avoiding all the work. Now that is a moment when that same person enjoys being idle. So the writer says impossible to enjoy truly. You can enjoy idleness truly if you have a huge pile of work, plenty of work to do. It is impossible to enjoy idling truly unless one has plenty of work to do. So the feeling of laziness, the feeling of being idle, when can you enjoy that feeling completely, truly? According to the writer, you can savor that feeling completely When you have lots and lots of work to do, but you are intentionally avoiding it. When you have truckload of work, when you have pile of work to do, but still you are sitting idle. So in your mind, when you think you have a lot of work and still you are not doing, that means you're sitting idle. According to the writer, that is when you enjoy the feeling of laziness. There is no fun in doing nothing when you have nothing to do. So, opposite to sentence 11, the writer says, assume that you are sitting at your own house and you have no work to do at all. So, would you feel that you are lazy? You are being idle? No. If you have nothing to do at all, yes, there is no fun in being idle and being lazy. Wasting time is merely an occupation then, and a most exhausting one. Wasting time is merely an occupation then, when you have nothing to do. Assume that you have no work to do at all. Then you think about how can I kill time, how can I waste time, and it becomes your occupation, it becomes your duty. And thinking about the ways by which you can kill time, you can waste time, is an exhausting one. You get tired of thinking about things that you should do to kill time, to waste time. Idleness, like kisses, to be sweet must be stolen. What does the writer mean by this sentence? The author says, laziness must be stolen. Stolen from where? From the moment you have been assigned a lot of work. When you are assigned a lot of work, you have to find a moment wherein you can become lazy. You can avoid the work intentionally. According to the author, this is a moment which you should grab and not wait for it to come. Many years ago, when I was a young man, I was taken very ill. I never could see myself that much was the matter with me, except that I had a beastly cold. So when the author was young, when the writer was young, just a boy, he had fallen severely ill. He had fallen sick. But he never thought that his sickness was serious. He never anticipated that his illness is a serious one. But I suppose it was something very serious, for the doctor said that I ought to have come to him a month before, and that if whatever it was had gone on for another week, he would not have answered for the consequences. So although the writer didn't take his disease as a serious one, it was actually a serious disease. And when he went to the doctor said, you should have come a month before. And that if he had delayed for yet another week, he had postponed meeting the doctor, then it would have become very difficult for the doctor to address the disease and treated the author for the consequences, or we can say outcome. It is an extraordinary thing, but I never knew a doctor called into any case yet. But what it transpired that another day's delay would have rendered cure hopeless. It's a very strange and extraordinary thing for the author that the doctors always show up at the last moment. It is a strange thing for the author that the doctor always says that if you would have come some other day, if you would have come another day, then the delay would have been rendered the cure hopeless, which means if you would have delayed coming to the hospital, the doctor would not have been able to cure you. Now this even is strange for the author. Our medical guide, philosopher and friend is like the hero in melodrama. He always comes upon the scene just and only just in the nick of time. It is providence that is what it is. So this strange situation is compared to that of a play or a drama which has exaggerated characters. We call it melodrama. So when your friend is behaving in a very reactive way, what do you say? Stop your melodrama. So the author says the doctor in this case is like a medical guide, philosopher and a friend who, like in the movies, shows up just in the nick of time. like a hero. And then the author summarizes that it is providence. That is what it is. Providence means luck. So according to the author, it is all the matter of luck. Well, as I was saying, I was very ill and was ordered to Buxton for a month with strict injunctions to do nothing whatever all the while that I was there. Rest is what you require, said the doctor. Perfect rest. Now the author comes back to the point. He was referring to an illness that he had as a boy many years ago. And he continues in sentence number 20. Because he was ill, because the illness was severe, it was critical, he went to the doctor, to which the doctor said, you need to rest and take perfect rest. Do nothing at all. Sit idle until your illness is cured. The doctor also asked the author to shift to a town in England called Buxton for a month. It seemed a delightful prospect. How was this possible? The writer is ill and the doctor has ordered the writer not to do anything for a month. How can it be delightful? It can be delightful because the author loves to be idle. The author loves to be lazy. He doesn't want to do anything anyway. So when the doctor said, you got to take rest, you cannot do anything for a month. So listening to this prescription, to the advice, he felt very delightful. And then the author thought out loudly, this man evidently understands my complaint, said I, and I pictured to myself a glorious time of 4 weeks, dolce far niente, with a dash of illness in it. Eventually the author, the writer, felt that there is someone who actually understands him, who understands that the author doesn't like to do anything, understands that the author loves to be idle. And then the writer started having imaginations of how he would do nothing at all for 1 whole month, which he considers to be a glorious times. A glorious time of 4 weeks. So 1 month has 4 weeks. So the author thought, what an incredible time. I have to do nothing at all. Now this is an Italian phrase, dolce far niente. It means sweet idleness, sweet laziness, pleasantly doing nothing, with a dash of illness in it, which means dolce far niente dash illness. Or we can say sweet idleness dash illness. Not too much illness, but just illness enough, just sufficient to give it the flavor of suffering and make it poetical. So when you tell someone that you are ill, the person in front of you has some empathy for you, and the person whom you're talking to feels that you are suffering. So the author says illness, but not a critical one, just enough for someone to make them feel, to make him or her feel that the author was suffering, and also to make the listener or the observer or some other person emotional about the author. I should get up late, sip chocolate and have my breakfast in slippers and a dressing gown. So usually when people are around, when you're surrounded by people, can you do everything that comes to your mind? Can you be completely free? No. There are people who constantly instruct you, advise you, but here the author thought that he can get up late. There's nobody to tell him to wake up early. He can, on his own desire, sip chocolate, maybe a chocolate shake or something, wear some nice slippers and have some healthy breakfast, and also wear a loose dressing gown. Now all of these indicates complete liberty. Now this is crazy, this is hilarious. When the doctor insisted the author that he's supposed to remain in Buxton for a month and do nothing at all, there were some visions, there were some imaginations that the author has, that the author dreams about. What am I gonna do when I will be completely free? when there's no one to tell me what I'm supposed to do. So we saw how he is thinking about getting up late, sipping some nice and maybe hot chocolate shake, and having great breakfast in nice slippers and loose dressing gown. And furthermore, I should lie out in the garden in a hammock and read sentimental novels with a melancholy ending until the books should fall from my listless hand, and I should recline there, dreamily gazing into the deep blue of the firmament, watching the fleecy clouds floating like white sailed ships across its depths, and listening to the joyous songs of birds and low rustling of the trees. Wow. Furthermore, the author imagines that in the hospital garden there will be a hammock. I have written the meaning: a bed made of canvas or rope mesh. This is what a hammock is. Take a good look so that you know, and I'm very sure some of you might be having a hammock in your own gardens, right? So the author imagined himself to lie in a nice and relaxing hammock with a sentimental, emotional novels in his hand, which has a sad ending. Now, all that the author is trying to tell us is, read a novel which is very interesting, maybe a love story. And you know what happens when you are completely engrossed in an interesting book? Your mind starts wandering, your mind starts dreaming. So similarly, the author imagines himself to lie in a nice hammock, reading a great book, and that book making him drowsy, and eventually he loses the control of his own hands and finally goes into a dream world. Now, while he is gradually slipping into sleep and dream world, he is gazing, he is looking at the deep blue firmament. Firmament is heaven. And then watching the clouds floating by, metaphorically speaking, just like ships sailing. And obviously there would be trees around the hammock, on which there would be some nice migratory birds who would be chirping. And the author also imagines cool breeze flowing through that area. So because of that, the branches, they rub with each other, the breeze rubs off with the leaves and makes a whispering sound. Now I'm very sure imagining all this would have made you feel relaxed, but this is what the author also imagined when the doctor insisted that he should not be doing anything for at least 4 weeks. He said there'd be nobody to regulate me, and I would sit in the garden in a hammock, read nice novels, slip into dreamy world, and hear the birds and trees. Moving on. Or, on becoming too weak to go out of doors, I should sit propped up with pillows at the open window of the ground floor front and look wasted and interesting, so that all the pretty girls would sigh as they pass by. Because the author is ill, he is imagining himself certain occasions, certain events, certain days wherein he has become weak and he can no longer go out of doors. And when this is the case, all he would do is he would sit at the open window which is at the ground floor front, and here he imagines himself to look wasted. What is the meaning of to look wasted? Means you have a nice body, but because of the illness you cannot do anything. That's looking wasted and interesting. You show people that you want to do something but you cannot. So the author would establish himself right there at the open window. He would look around people, he would keep on observing, and he has some naughty thoughts in his mind. He would establish himself near the window so that he can gain some sympathy from good-looking girls as they passed by the ground floor. Now friends, we already know that these are just his imaginations. So we know that the author already thought of relaxing himself as far as he could. He also imagines some days when he would have grabbed pillows and would have established himself at the open window on the ground floor itself, looking so weak and interesting at the same time, to gain attention of the girls that pass by. So what is the writer trying to tell us here? Let's go back to the 13th sentence. Wasting time is merely an occupation then, and a most exhausting one. And before that, there is no fun in doing nothing when you have nothing to do. So to make the sentence number 12 more clear, the author has brought us back to an incident wherein he was severely ill, and he imagined himself to enjoy the idleness because he eventually had nothing to do at all. So, did he really enjoy being idle when he had nothing to do at all? Let's find out. And twice a day I should go down in a bath chair to the colonnade to drink the waters. Now this is what a bath chair looks like. Take a closer look. So what is the author trying to convey here? The author was asked to visit the colonnade 2 times a day to drink and to taste and feel fresh waters. Oh, those waters, I knew nothing about them then and was rather taken with the idea. So here is an idiom that you should learn. To be taken with the idea. When you are taken with something, you are interested in that thing. So to be taken with an idea means to be carried away, to be in complete support of the idea. So when the doctors or the nurses insisted or advised the author that he should go to the colonnade and drink waters, he knew nothing about the waters at first, but it sounded like a good idea. So when somebody told the author, you have to drink the waters, it sounded really stylish and fashionable, resembling the era in which Queen Anne lived. Now, the author has coined this word, Queen Anne-fied, which indicates resembling the era wherein Queen Anne lived. You know, like traditional. And on my screen you can see Queen Anne. She served as a queen from 1702 to 1707. Queen of Britain. And the author anticipated that he might like the waters. He might love the waters. But after the first 3 or 4 mornings, Sam Weller's description of them as having a taste of warm flat irons conveys only a faint idea of their hideous nauseousness. Alright, so what you can see is the description of Sam Weller. The famous author Charles Dickens had written a novel which goes by the name of The Pickwick Papers, and Sam Weller was one of the fictional characters. And in that novel there is a phrase called having a taste of warm flat irons, which means completely tasteless. Now the author says this phrase is an understatement as compared to how actually the water tasted. The water had a completely sick taste and the author felt like nauseating. Initially, for the first 3 or 4 mornings, the author was alright. He drank the water anyway, but then he felt sick after having drunk that water. Moving on. If anything could make a sick man get well quickly, it would be the knowledge that he must drink a glass full of them every day until he was recovered. To make it very simple, according to the author, there was only one thing that the doctors insisted and advised that he should do in order to get well quickly, and that was the knowledge or the daily routine where he remembered that he must drink at least a glass of the water, of the mineral water. drank them neat for 6 consecutive days and they nearly killed me. But after then, I adopted the plan of taking a stiff glass of brandy and water immediately on top of them and found much relief thereby. So, how did the author manage to follow the advice of the doctors of drinking the mineral water daily? He did it religiously for 6 days. He could not take it anymore. He didn't relish the idea. But then he had to figure a way out. So, after drinking mineral water, he would take a glass, he would take brandy. What is brandy? It is a strong alcoholic drink. And water. He would mix brandy and water and drink on top of the mineral water. And obviously, he was relieved after having taken that. Moving on. I have been informed since by various eminent medical gentlemen that alcohol must have entirely counteracted the effects of the chalybeate properties contained in the water. So to give you a real life example, what do you do when the doctor instructs you to take a medicine which is bitter in taste? You do take the medicine, but have maybe a mouth freshener after that, just so that you feel good. Similarly, the author was asked to drink mineral water to get well quickly, but he took brandy after that. And many eminent people, many famous people told the author, many knowledgeable doctors told the author that the alcohol must have counteracted or opposed the effects of mineral water. In short, there was no point of consuming mineral water if it was followed with a glass of brandy and water. Brandy nullified the effects of mineral water, and why not? It is an alcoholic drink, and that too a strong one. Even though the author says, I am glad I was lucky enough to hit upon the right thing. Even when many knowledgeable people, many eminent people told the author that brandy must have destroyed the curative powers of mineral water, the author still feels happy that he found a solution to follow the ritual of having mineral water every day to get well quickly. But drinking the waters was only a small portion of the torture I experienced during that memorable month, a month which was, without exception, the most miserable I have ever spent. The author is being sarcastic here. When the author states memorable month, it was the most miserable month that the author ever experienced being ill. One thing that he talked about in the previous paragraphs was drinking the mineral water, which was nauseating for him, which was sickening, which made him feel sick. Now this, the author states, was only the small part of his torture which he felt during that month. During the best part of it, I religiously followed the doctor's mandate and did nothing whatever except move about the house and garden and go out for 2 hours a day in a bath chair. So what was the doctor's mandate, which means instruction? The doctor's mandate was to take perfect rest. So as we know, the author loves being idle. So the author states that during the best part of the month, the author dedicatedly took rest, followed the doctor's instruction and did nothing at all, except sometimes he used to roam about in the house and the garden for at least 2 hours in a bath chair. And the author states that did break the monotony. So the author was sick of the same schedule. Get up, take medicines, go to drink water, and then take rest in the afternoon, go out in the evening. So the same schedule was repeating over and again. So he used to take a break and roam about in the house and garden, which helped break the monotony, break the repeating schedule. There is more excitement about bath chairing, especially if you are not used to the exhilarating exercise that might appear to the casual observer. Now I've shown you the bath chair. This is how a bath chair looks like. And according to the author, it's not as simple as an observer might think there is something thrilling and exhilarating about sitting in the bath chair and being carried by a nurse. A sense of danger, such as a mere outsider might not understand, is ever present to the mind of the occupant. So a casual observer might think that, okay, a person is being carried in a bath chair, what's the big deal? It's normal. The person would be comfortable. But no, according to the author, there is a little danger when you are seated in a bath chair. An observer, an outsider might not understand that danger. But the danger is always there in the mind of the person who is sitting on the bath chair. Occupant is the person who is sitting on the bath chair. He feels convinced every minute that the whole concern is going over, a conviction which becomes especially lively whenever a ditch or a stretch of newly macadamized road comes in sight. Let's understand the first part of the sentence. The person sitting in a bathing chair, or we can say bath chair, is convinced. He knows for sure that when he is being carried away in the bathing chair, there is something he should be worried about. He keeps on judging that feeling. Now that feeling becomes lively. That feeling actually comes into play when the bathing chair starts shaking. Now why would it start shaking? Because of a ditch or stones or pits on the road make the chair shake. Every vehicle that passes he expects is going to run into him, and he never finds himself ascending or descending a hill without immediately beginning to speculate upon his chances, supposing, as seems extremely probable, that the weak-kneed controller of his destiny should let go. Let's break down this sentence as well. Let's understand the first part. Every vehicle that passes, he expects is going to run into him. So when a person was carrying the writer on his bath chair, first of all, he felt uncomfortable because of the pits and ditches and stones on the road, because the chair shook. Next, the author thought that each and every vehicle that passed by his chair would collide with him. And whenever he was in his bath chair, driven on a slopy surface, driven on an inclined surface, whether he was going up or whether he was coming down, he would keep on guessing one thing. What are the chances that the person who's carrying me would let go? In simple words, what is the probability of the person who is carrying the author upwards or downwards on the hill get out of control, could no longer control the bath chair anymore? So we can easily say that the author was extremely scared when he was in his bath chair. But even this diversion failed to enliven after a while, and ennui became perfectly unbearable. So which diversion is the author referring to here? We already know that the author was bored because he had nothing to do, and the only activity that he did was roam about in the bath chair. So now the author states that this diversion in his activity, roaming about in the bath chair, failed to uplift his mood. Few days later, and the boredom became completely unbearable. There was a point after which the author was unable to bear the laziness or idleness. I felt my mind giving way under it. Giving way is an idiom which means to collapse. The author felt that his mind was collapsing by the laziness, by the boredom. It is not a strong mind, and I thought it would be unwise to tax it too far. The writer, the author, thought that his own mind was not strong enough to face too much of boredom, and it was not wise to keep on bearing the boredom, to keep on bearing this level of laziness? So somewhere about the 20th morning, I got up early, had a good breakfast and walked straight off to Hayfield at the foot of Kinderscout, a pleasant busy little town, reached through a lovely valley and with two sweetly pretty women in it. So the author decided that he should not be tolerating this level of boredom, such a great laziness, and he decided to escape. So somewhere around the 20th, which means the author stayed in the same location, Buxton, for 19 long days. He drank mineral water and he roamed around in the bathchair. But on the 20th morning, the author got up early, had a nice breakfast and escaped to a busy little town, which he reached through a lovely valley. And at that location, he saw two nice women in it, two sweet women located there, sitting there. At least they were sweetly pretty then. One passed me on the bridge and I think smiled, and the other was standing at an open door making an unremunerative investment of kisses upon a red-faced baby. The author starts with, at least they were sweetly pretty then. Now we already know the author is trying to recall the past, so he states during that time they were pretty. I don't know about the present situation. During that time they looked very pretty. Now he goes on with a description of the two women. One passed me on the bridge and I think she smiled at me, and the other was standing at an open door kissing her little baby. But was the baby feeling any better by the kisses of the second woman? No, and therefore the author has used the word unremunerative, bringing little or no profit. So this sentence just gives us the description of the two women which the writer saw after he escaped Buxton. But it is years ago, and I dare say they have both grown stout and snappish since that time. The author states this was long back, years ago, and both the ladies would have become fat and irritable since that time. Coming back, I saw an old man breaking stones, and it roused such a strong longing in me to use my arms that I offered him a drink to let me take his place. Coming back from where? From the hospital. So he fled from the hospital, as we already know, and came to a nice place with valleys and lush green atmosphere and nice environment around. And on the way, the author saw an old man working out, old man who was breaking stones. Now, after 19-20 days of being absolutely lazy, the author notices that there is a person who's working hard, who has some work. So looking at the old man, the author also felt like he should work. He should do some kind of work because he was bored completely. And the author also had developed a deep longing to work. So looking at the old man, he said, "Would you allow me to do what you are doing? I will give you a drink in return." Now the old man, he didn't do it just for the sake of doing it, but he did it to make a living. He earned money through that. And when he heard such an offer, the old man felt strange. But let's see what happened next. He was a kindly old man and he humored me. So the old man accepted the offer just so that the author was satisfied. The old man said, "Okay, you can break the stones. Meanwhile, I'll have your drink." Now you see, this is such a weird and interesting situation. A person who's completely bored is looking out for work, is looking out for anything that he can get. So what happened next? I went for those stones with the accumulated energy of 3 weeks and did more work in half an hour than he had done all day. So staying at the hospital and recovering completely, The author had gained a lot of strength. His hands were stronger than ever. He had harnessed a lot of energy in 3 weeks, so that is 3 into 7, 21 days. Roughly 21 days. And the author started breaking stones. He broke more and more stones, and it turned out that he did so much work in just half an hour than the old man could do in one whole day. But did it make the old man jealous? No, it did not make him jealous. Having taken the plunge, I went further and further into dissipation, going out for a long walk every morning and listening to the band in the pavilion every evening. So the author started doing activities which would make him happy. He started indulging into those things which gave him pleasure. For example, going out for long walks every morning, and then in the evening he would go to a place where there was a band playing some sort of music. But the days still passed slowly, notwithstanding, and I was heartily glad when the last one came and I was being whirled away from gouty, consumptive Buxton to London with its stern work and life. Despite of the fact that the author had found activities which would give him pleasure and joy, at least temporarily, he didn't find time passing by quickly. The days still passed slowly in spite of all these activities. And then eventually it was the time for the author to get released from the hospital at Buxton and go back to London. And some adjectives the author has used for the place he lived in Buxton while he was ill. The adjectives are gouty, which means diseased; consumptive, which again means disease, affected with wasting disease. Now these adjectives just show how much the author hated Buxton and the stay in Buxton. So London, when the author came back to London, it had a strict life, because people worked hard and people strived to strike a balance between work and life. Moving on, I looked out of carriage as we rushed through Hendon in the evening. So here we get to know that the author was coming back from Buxton to London in a carriage. Now carriage is any section of the train that carried the passengers. So he was coming back by a train and he looked out of the carriage through Hendon. Now Hendon is an urban area of London, and it was evening. The lurid glare overhanging the mighty city seemed to warm my heart, and when later on my cab rattled out of St. Pancras station, the old familiar roar that came swelling up around me sounded the sweetest music I had heard for many a long day. So in the previous sentence, we get to know that the author was coming back by the train and looks like he is enjoying every moment of his trip back home. He looks out of the window. The mighty city through which the author is passing is bright. And then when he passed the St. Pancras station, he heard the noise of the busy streets, the hubbub of people, the noise of busy life. And this noise was familiar to him, which he calls sweet music. And the author states that he was longing for this day when he would come back and listen to this sort of music. I certainly did not enjoy that month's idling. Now friends, the chapter, the title is On Being Idle. So the author starts by telling us that he loves to be idle, he loves being lazy, but then he recalls an incident when he falls severely ill as a boy. He becomes severely diseased. He has nothing at all to do in Buxton, and then the author tells us how torturing it was for him. Obviously, when he comes back to London, he feels warm and good, and happy. And in the sentence 56, he concludes that he certainly, for sure, did not enjoy 1 month of being idle. I like idling when I ought not to be idling, not when it is the only thing I have to do. Now let's understand this statement, it's an important one. The author says that he does not like to be lazy when he should not be. The author loves to be idle when he should not be idle, which means if somebody has given the author a lot of work, that is the time when the author loves to behave lazily, to be idle. Not when it is the only thing I have to do. So the doctor asked the author to be idle, and that was the only thing that the author was supposed to do. So during that phase, the author did not like to be idle at all. That's what the author means here. That is my pig-headed nature. The meaning of pig-headed is stupidly stubborn. The time when I like best to stand with my back to the fire, calculating how much I owe, is when my desk is heaved highest with letters that must be answered by the next post. You have another phrase here, to stand with my back to the fire. Now it means to move away from something. So as I said a couple of seconds back, when does the author feel like being idle? It's when he has a lot of work, when his desk, where he is supposed to work, is full of letters that he must answer immediately. That is the time when the author feels like he should become lazy, at least for a moment. When I like to dawdle longest over my dinner is when I have a heavy evening's work before me. So the author says he loves to be lazy, he loves to be idle only in a case where he has a lot of work to do. There are a lot of priorities, there are a lot of tasks that he ought to complete immediately. And if for some urgent reason I ought to be up particularly early in the morning, it is then, more than at any other time, that I love to lie an extra half hour in bed. So sometimes the author has morning tasks, sometimes the author should get up early in the morning and complete some urgent tasks, some tasks that are on priority. But it is only during that time, the author says, that he loves to lie an extra half an hour. So when he should be getting up early, he should be getting up quickly and doing the task. What does the author do? He chooses to sleep extra half hour. Ah, how delicious it is to turn over and go to sleep again just for 5 minutes. I'm sure you're able to relate to this sentence because every morning when your parents, your mom and your dad, they force you to wake up to go to school, what do you say? Mom, just 5 more minutes. Dad, just 15 more minutes. Now, aren't those 5 minutes and 15 minutes delicious? Aren't those 5 minutes and 15 minutes sweetest time of your lives? Yes, so similarly, the author says that sleeping extra for 5 minutes or 30 minutes is the best thing in his life. Next. Is there any human being, I wonder, besides the hero of a Sunday school tale for boys, who ever gets up willingly? The author questions, the author wonders. Is there any person who gets up early even on Sundays, except for a few who try to become story for boys and inspiration for other boys? There are few in hundreds of people who get up early, and that too willingly, with their own desire on a fine Sunday morning. The author questions, are there any such people? There are some men to whom getting up at the proper time is an utter impossibility. I'm sure you must have come across some people who are always late. You ask them to reach at 10 a.m. and they start getting ready from their houses at 10 a.m. and reach at 10:30. So, for some people, Not just getting up, but being on time is a complete impossibility. They just can't be on time. They just can't get up on time. If 8 o'clock happens to be the time that they should turn out, then they lie till past. Now there is a phrase called turn out, or sometimes you also say show up. Now both of these phrases mean to reach there, right? To reach at the destined place. So just as I said few seconds back, if 8 o'clock is the time, they lie till 8:30. They lie there on their beds or stay there in their houses till 8:30. Forget about reaching the place at 8. If circumstances change and 8:30 becomes early enough for them, then it is 9 before they can rise. So, for some strange reason, if the person who has called this particular person who is inside his house reschedules the meeting from 8 to say sometime later, maybe 9:30 or 10, what does this person do? The person keeps on sleeping till it's already time to meet. So if circumstances change, meaning if the meeting or the work is rescheduled and 8:30 becomes early enough, so the meeting or the work which was supposed to be at 8 is rescheduled for 9, and therefore 8:30 has become early for that lazy person, what would they do? They would keep on sleeping till even 9 a.m. They are like the statesman of whom it was said that he always punctually half an hour late. They are like the statesman of whom it was said that he was always punctually half an hour late. Now there is a figure of speech here. Two words placed opposite to each other in a sentence. What is that? That is oxymoron. Punctually would mean that a person has reached on time, but half an hour late would mean that the person is late. So these two words, or we can say one word and this phrase, are contradicting each other, and therefore they are oxymoron. So what is the author trying to convey here? Now the author was talking about some people who cannot be on time, who just cannot be on time. They make excuses upon excuses, and then the author is comparing those people with that of a senior politicians. If you would have known some senior people, it may be in your school, or maybe heard about some senior actors, you would have also heard that they are usually late because of their seniority, maybe because they are into the habit of reaching late. And then the author says they try all manner of schemes to show the world or to convince themselves that they tried to come on time, they tried to get up early, but it failed. So what are the different methods that they usually deploy or implement? They buy alarm clocks, artful contrivances that go off at the wrong time and alarm the wrong people. So one of the trick that they use is get an alarm clock. Next trick, they tell Sarah Jane to knock at the door and call them, and Sarah Jane does knock at the door and does call them, and they grunt back awry and then go comfortably to sleep again. So who's Sarah Jane here? Sarah Jane is some random lady who this lazy person has asked to knock the door when the time is right, when the person has to attend meeting, or when the person has to get up early, or when he has to reach a destination, and Sarah Jane does her job punctually and dedicatedly. But what does this person do? The person who's just like a statesman, he would reply Sarah Jane in a very grunting tone. Who grunts? Which animal grunts? It's a pig that makes a grunting sound. So just like a pig, when they are in their beds, they reply and ask the lady, or say something like, not right now, not the right time, something like that, and then they go back to sleep again. I knew one man who would actually get out and have a cold bath, and even that was of no use, for afterward he would jump into bed again to warm himself. The author knew a person who would get up early on time, and to banish his sleep, he would get inside the bathroom and have a cold bath. But Was that of any use? No, because he would take a cold bath and then get back into his bed and cover himself with a nice and warm quilt. I think myself that I could keep out of bed all right if I once got out. The author is not that type of a person, that kind of a person, the type of person whom he cited in the previous sentences, that people get up and they go back to sleep. People open their eyes and they go back to sleep. No, the author is not like that. If the author got out of his bed, then he would be out of the bed without a doubt, without a second thought that he should sleep again. It is the wrenching away of the head from the pillow that I find so hard, and no amount of overnight determination makes it easier. So doesn't that happen with you sometimes? When you feel that your daily schedule is not up to the mark, when you feel like you want to change the daily routine and get up early in the morning, you keep on thinking, you sleep with that thought in your mind, and you are determined that okay, I will wake up early no matter what happens. But in the morning when the alarm goes off, isn't it very hard to pull away your pillow under your head? So the author is referring to the same situation. So the author is trying to explain the same thing. It is also very hard for him to get up early, in spite of the fact that he was determined when he slept. I say to myself, after having wasted the whole evening, well, I won't do any more work tonight. I'll get up early tomorrow morning. And I'm truly resolved to do so then. So there is work on one fine evening. There is work that the author has to complete. But on the previous day evening, the author convinces himself that he should stop. He shouldn't work. He will do the work. He will complete the work next day in the morning when he gets up early. So the author in that evening is convinced completely and ready to get up early in the morning. In the morning, however, I feel less enthusiastic about the idea and reflect that it would have been much better if I had stopped up last night. So, in the previous sentence, we saw how the author is determined to wake up early in the morning and finish that work. But what happens in the morning when he gets up? In the morning, the author feels less interested about completing the task which he left the previous day in the evening. And then he regrets that it would have been better if he already completed that work last night itself. And then there is the trouble of dressing, and the more one thinks about that, the more one wants to put it off. So what happens in the morning? In the morning, the author has to get fresh and dress up to go to work. And this particular ritual of dressing up, being nice and tidy, is a task, is a big task for the author. The author feels that it is a painful job and also a monotonous one. And when the author is dressing up, the author also has the task completion at the back of his mind. And so the author wants to push the task even further. Or we can say procrastinate. I'll do it later, or not right now. Something like that. It is a strange thing, this bed, this mimic grave, where we stretch our tired limbs and sink away so quietly into the silence and rest. Now, our beds, the bed on which we sleep every single day, is a strange thing for the author. And the author calls it a mimic grave. Mimic is to copy. Grave is a place where we bury people when they are dead. So, the author is finding this thing called bed very strange, because we just get into our beds and stretch ourselves and then silently and peacefully go to sleep and take enough rest. So according to the author, this thing is mimicking a grave. O bed, delicious bed, that heaven on earth to the very head, as sang poor Hood, you are a kind old nurse to us fretful boys and girls. I know the question that you have in your mind What is Hood? Who is Hood? The author is trying to refer to an author, Thomas Hood. This is about 1800s when he had written an article which had this line. Now, what is the meaning of this line? The author Thomas Hood is addressing the bed itself. Thomas Hood states that, "Dear bed, you are heaven for those who are extremely tired. You are like a nurse to the people who are stressed and irritated." Aren't these lines interesting? Oh bed, delicious bed, that heaven on earth to the weary head. Alright, moving on. Clever and foolish, naughty and good, you take us all in your motherly lap and hush our wayward crying. So have you ever experienced this? There are certain days when you feel like everything is out of place, especially in the evenings and especially at night. You feel you're not at your best, you're not into your elements, and you feel as if situation is never gonna improve. But what happens when you wake up after a nice sleep? You are full of hopes, isn't it? You are full of aspirations and dreams in the morning. So here the author addresses the same kind of sleep and is actually praising the thing called bed. Again, personification here. So whether the person is clever, foolish, naughty or good, the bed takes us all, metaphorically speaking, in its motherly lap. And as soon as these people get on the bed, they feel good. They stop crying, metaphorically speaking, and they are silenced to sleep. More than the bed, the author is trying to explain how important our sleep is to us. Furthermore, the author says, the strong man full of care, the sick man full of pain, the little maiden sobbing of her faithless lover. Like children, we lay our aching heads on your white bosom, and you gently soothe us off to bye-bye. In the previous sentence, the author talked about clever people, foolish person, naughty person, a good person, a bad person. Every kind of person is lulled to sleep on this thing called bed. Furthermore, a person who is very strong and full of care, a person who is sick and full of pain, and a girl who is unmarried and she is hurt by her faithless lover. Another person might have hurt her and she is crying on her bed. And all of these people are welcome on the thing called bed, where we will lay our heads, lay our aching heads, meaning when we are distressed or in pain, we go to bed. To be very simple, on your white bosom. Now, bosom is a woman's chest, so sometimes you are very sad and upset. What do? You hug your mother and cry on her bosom. So similarly, again, this is a personification where the author addresses the pillow as a bosom, where an irritated or stressed or a person in pain lays his or her head on the pillow and goes to sleep. So furthermore, and you gently soothe us off to bye-bye. Soothe us means calm us down to sleep. Again, these sentences are full of praises for the bed as well as our sleep. Our trouble is sore indeed when you turn away and will not comfort us. Again, the author is addressing the bed itself. The author says our pain is not a small one. It is suffering. It is tragic. Our stress level is too much. Our stress level is increasing, and if you do not comfort us, then it's fairly possible that we will not be okay the next day. What is the meaning of turning away? To turn away is to deny or to say no. How long the dawn seems coming when we cannot sleep. So isn't this something that you can relate? Sometimes when you cannot sleep at night, you feel like, why is the night so long? Why is the morning not coming through? You keep on waiting for the sunrise, which never seems to come fast. Oh, those hideous nights when we toss and turn in fever and pain, when we lie like living men among the dead, staring out into the dark hours that drift so slowly between us and the light. The author is again referring to the hours of night, especially during midnight when we cannot sleep and we wait for the morning, we wait for the dawn, we wait for the sunrise. The author is calling all those hours as hideous, meaning ugly. When we cannot sleep and so we toss and turn constantly, in fever or in pain, when we are lying down and it's just like people who are actually living, who has life in it, but they are as good as dead. And we keep looking out of the window, we keep looking out of our galleries and wait for the hours, wait for the time to pass by, and all of this happens between the people and the dawn or the sunrise. And oh, those still more hideous nights when we sit by another in pain, when these low fire startles us every now and then with a falling cinder, and the tick of the clock seems a hammer beating out the life that we are watching. Let's understand this sentence. The author already talked about the hours when you cannot sleep at all and so you toss and turn on your bed and wait for the dawn. Now the situation is different. There's another person who is in pain, who is in agony, maybe diseased, maybe having fever or some sort of illness, and you are sitting beside that person who is suffering. And in the olden times, people used to have these lamps to keep up some brightness in the rooms, and all those hours when the fire keeps on burning, you're observing the flame and the ashes that generate from the lamp. Now just imagine yourself sitting beside a person who is in pain. Let's assume that you go back to 100 years where there were no tube lights or electricity, you just had lamps. Imagine yourself sitting with your friend in a room which has lamp burning. You are observing the fire and the ashes that are generated, and then you look at the mechanical clock that look like a hammer that's beating out the life from the person beside whom you are sitting. So in simple words, the author is trying to tell us how important it is for us to sleep, to be healthy, and most importantly, the importance of the thing called bed. So it looks like the author was talking about idleness and laziness, and suddenly he took a detour about beds and about sleeps. So then he says, but enough of beds and bedrooms. Let's come back to the topic of idleness. I have kept to them too long, even for an idle fellow. They had no work to do and could not smoke, and hence the consequence was they were forever fighting and rowing. So as I said, an idle mind is a devil's workshop, because these people have nothing to do and they had no access to tobacco. They became wild and started engaging in wars. Sentence number 93 is pretty interesting. If by any extraordinary chance there was no war going, then they got up a deadly family feud with the next door neighbor. And if, in spite of this, they still had a few spare moments on their hands, they occupied them with discussion as to whose sweetheart was the best looking. The arguments employed on both sides being battle axes, clubs, etc. So let's assume that these people, these young men, did not involve in wars. What else would they do? They would start fighting with their immediate neighbors, because their mind is idle. They are not thinking creative. They have no creative pastime or something that makes them relaxed or happy. So their mind is pessimistic and they start fighting even with the next door neighbor, and the fight is not a small one. It's a deadly fight. And let's assume that the fight was over. They are free now. They have some spare time with them. What would they do in those times? They would sit with their friends and talk about whose girlfriend was pretty and whose was not, and start fighting on those topics, on those smaller and petty topics, and waste time in trivial discussions. Questions of taste were soon decided in those days. In those days, which days is the writer referring to here? The same period before Sir Walter Scott's time. Questions about preferences of a person were soon thought about in those days. So if one person met another person, he would ask questions like, whom do you like the most? So the author is trying to talk about love and a preference that a person gives in choosing his better half. The writer says, when a 12th century youth fell in love, he did not take 3 paces backward, gaze into her eyes and tell her she was too beautiful to live. So the author is referring to the 12th century and especially the people who are young. So in those days, it was not that simple. If a boy loved a girl, he wouldn't simply say, I love you. He wouldn't straight away admit that the girl was very beautiful. They had their own ways of proving their love for the girls. He said he would step outside and see about it. Again, why is the author talking about all these things? He is trying to point out that youth did not have creative pastime, and so they indulged in these activities. And then he's talking about love. When one person loved the another person, he wouldn't admit directly, but he would say, let me see what I can do about it. Alright, and if when he got out he met a man and broke his head, the other man's head, then that proved that the first fellow's girl was a pretty girl. So what would happen? One person loves a girl. He meets another person outside, and he would get involved in trivial quarrels, trivial disputes, start fighting with the other fellow, and it would just prove that the winner of the fight, that is the first person, his girl was pretty girl, because he won the fight. But if the other fellow broke his head, not his own, but the other fellow to the second fellow, that is, because of course the other fellow would only be the other fellow to him, not the fellow who, if he broke his head, then his girl, not the other fellow's, but the fellow who was the... Look here, if A broke B's head, then A's girl was pretty girl. If B broke A's head, then A's girl wasn't a pretty girl, but B's girl was. So here the author is trying to explain the whole context, whole idea that he wants to convey, but then he simplifies it. For example, there's a person called A, the person who goes by the name A. There's another person who goes by the name B, and if A likes a girl, he meets another person, gets involved in trivial fights and comes out as a winner. If this situation happens, then A's girl was a beautiful girl, was a pretty girl. But if reverse happened, if the other person broke the first person's head, then the other person's girl was a pretty one. Now this is how people used to spend time, and the author calls it art criticism. That was their method of conducting art criticism. Art criticism revolves around beauty. So in those times, people would get involved in making up such discussions by getting involved in these things, in trivial disputes. Nowadays, we light a pipe and let the girls fight it about amongst themselves. Nowadays, we light a pipe and let the girls fight it out among themselves. So during the time of the author, and because they have tobacco with which they can kill time, there is no question about whose girl is pretty, or there is no question about proving by fights that whose girl is pretty and whose is not. Person A would like his girl, person B would like his girl, and they wouldn't prove to each other as to whose girl was the best. Because in the author's times, there would be smoking. They'll just smoke it out. They'll just consume tobacco and kill time graciously. On the other side, the girlfriends would feel jealous about each other and they would fight it out and sort out the dispute amongst themselves. They do it very well, these girls. They sort out the things very well. They're getting to do all our work. All our work is referred to which work? This work. Getting out, breaking each other's heads and proving. So the girls are saving a lot of time. Now this is again a humorous line, you can say a sarcasm, that the girls are proving themselves as to who was better. They are doctors and barristers and artists. The author is trying to reveal the powers of girls. They can solve things easily. They can heal a person by supporting him morally. So they are doctors. They are barristers. It is very difficult to win an argument with a girl, according to the author. And an artist, of course, they are creative, beautiful human beings. They manage theaters, promote swindles, and edit newspapers. Now, during the author's time, these were the occupations in which girls were involved. Managing these cinemas, promoting frauds, yes, promoting frauds, and editing the newspaper. The ladies used to be newspaper editors. Second last sentence of this chapter. I am looking forward to the time when we men shall have nothing to do but lie in our bed till 12 noon, read 2 novels a day, have nice little 5 o'clock teas all to ourselves, and tax our brains with nothing more than trying to discuss upon the latest patterns in trousers and arguments as to what Mr. Jones's coat was made of and whether it fitted him. Now this is the vision of the author about men. The author looks forward to a day when the gentlemen, when the males have nothing to do. Instead of getting up and going to work and being busy, the author is looking forward to a day when males will be lying on their beds till 12 noon, and because there were no mobiles or WhatsApp or Facebook or Twitter, they were just books, and which pleases the author the most. The author says he'll look forward to a day when he'll get up at his own wish, read 2 nice books, and then at 5 p.m. in the evening have nice teas which they'll make for themselves, and challenge our brain with nothing more. Which means the males will not be challenging their brains by involving in like jobs or visiting the office, but simple challenges like discussing upon the latest trousers that have come in the market, or in trivial discussion, in small discussions and arguments. For example, whether some random persons, whether the neighbor who goes by the name Mr. Jones, he bought a coat and whether it fitted him well. In short, the author is trying to tell us that he looks forward to a day when men can be completely idle. Now, here actually he is not addressing just the males but all the human beings. In short, he is trying to convey that he looks forward to a day when people can be completely idle and have nothing to do at all, and if at all they have to do something, it's not very challenging. It's just talking about the things that are going around in the environment or the surrounding with other people. Final sentence, it is a glorious prospect for idle fellows. The possibility or likelihood of happening something is called prospect. We can also name it as hope. It is a glorious hope. It is a glorious vision for the lazy fellows. So tell me frankly, when I read out this sentence, did you feel glorious? Did you feel happy? Yes, if so, then you are lazy. I'm just kidding. Everyone likes to relax and have their own times, and because the author is an idler, this vision is especially very soothing for him. Alright friends, having said that, we come to the end of this little essay which goes by the name of On Being Idle. This also has another name, as you can see on my screen, this is a book called Idle Thoughts of an Idle Fellow, and the essay that we just studied was the very first essay, and this is a hilarious version. In fact, all his essays are hilarious in these books. So this is the part 1. Part 2 was also out just a few years after that. I hope you've understood this essay. If not, please let me know in the comment section and I will try to clear your doubts. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I thank you for watching and being with me on this video.